Hi, I'm Nicola Correia-Damude and I'm on FrConventions. Oh, absolutely, vividly. I even remember there was an elevator. I just had my son. My son was like 5 months old, and so I was still in a bit of a fog. Or maybe he was a bit older, 6 months old. And I remember going up in an elevator in a studio that I didn't normally audition in, and walked in. And I remember the 3 scenes were all very different. I really liked that. Each scene was something very different. And I remember thinking like, oh, this would be a really cool part because it showed me what the arc, a bit of the arc of the character was. And I remember which scenes they were. It was the scene where I first see the children and I'm so mean to them and so abusive to all of them. And then there was one, a nicer one with Emeraude where I was trying to talk to her about responsibility. And I think the third one was one with Alec. Yeah. It was incredible, and you know, a lot of people don't realize that when you're on a TV show, actors most of the time, unless you're an executive producer, actors, we don't know what's going to happen. And I literally got that part, and I had no idea how many episodes I was going to be in. I had no idea. I could have been one. Like Opazala was guaranteed at the beginning. So the idea that there would be 3 seasons and a 2-hour special later, and then all of this, all these, you have no idea. So yeah, I mean, I was so excited. I think it's better that I didn't know where her character was going, because if I knew, I wouldn't have had that excitement. Like I remember the first script where she came back and started apologizing. She apologized to Luke, and I thought, oh my God, like I never could have seen this coming. And it's so fun as an actor when you're surprised by your own character. It's a really cool part of the job, so it was really great, yeah. And I was so proud of where she went. That was really funny. That was an ongoing joke because when I first arrived and I was like, hi, I'm Nicola. I play Maryse, and they were like, Matt was like, I'm sorry, you play who? It was like, you're my mother? And I was like, I'm your mother. So it was this ongoing joke because I think Matt's like 5 years younger than me or something like that, somewhere in that area. So we joked about it a lot, and it was one of those things where I think that's becoming less and less common now. In Hollywood in television for a very long time, the women were always much younger, and that was sort of a standard. And now I feel like the culture's changing a bit, and people are starting to say, hold on a second, like why do the women have to be 30 and the men have to be, and the men are 50? But you know, they were also angels. Like when I first got there, the way it was explained to me is that because they're angels, they age differently. So that was what was presented to me when I got the part, which made, but it is funny when it's really funny when you're supposed to be playing someone's mom and you're actually peers. It's an odd, and it's interesting because you'll be sitting and talking about the stuff you talk about with any other friend, and then they're like, okay, action, and then you're like, listen, son, it's not that Maryse ever said that, but so it's an interesting dynamic, and it's fun because I think there's something fun about it, which is that she was so much older than me. Like I was 32 when I got that part, or 33, and she was supposed to be much older. So you know, it's interesting to play someone that much older than you. It's a fun challenge. But yeah, we had a lot of laughs about it. I remember a director come in one day and be like, I don't understand. I don't get it. You're his mother. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I don't understand. And I was like, I don't know, take it up with the story of angels, and take it up. And you know, it's also a different world, right? That isn't ours. So yeah, but we had a lot of laughs about it. It's funny, Matt, so Emeraude and I really connected on family. Emeraude and I are both have very close families. So a lot of what Emeraude and I talked about was family life and that part of our world. And Matt and I talked a lot about politics, a lot about the education system and political systems, and we talked about personal stuff as well, but it was kind of an interesting, I feel like I had very different relationships. I have very different relationships with the two of them. But we had a really good time, you know, and it's a funny thing when you work together over a longer period, like over a few years, and you get to know each other better. Your characters have been supposed to know each other literally from the womb, in our case, but then you get to know each other better over time, and so I think it also can kind of deepen the work a little bit as you get to know, even if the audience can't see it, you can feel it, that you know these people now, and it helps with that familiarity with the characters. Yeah. I thought it was amazing. I mean, when I read I remember reading the script where it says Magnus starts to walk down the aisle accompanied by Maryse. So I can't remember what the sentence was. Maryse and Magnus walk down the aisle, and I just started to cry reading it because it was such a huge jump. I think it's really beautiful. You know, one thing that comes up a lot with fans of the show is a lot of our fans are members of the LGBTQ2S+ community, and that's not the experience they're having. Their parents are not accepting them. Their parents are not coming around and embracing them. And that's a reality for a lot of people. And we all know that. I think anyone in the community, as a part of the community or who loves people in the community, knows that a lot of people struggle with never being accepted by their families. So I think as much as that's the truth for a lot of people, it's also true that some people do change. And we need to, I'm a firm believer that we need to hold on to hope. And we need to hold on to the idea that we leave room for that kind of beautiful change in others. And Maryse is kind of the perfect example of that. She started off so homophobic and so, and it wasn't just homophobia, it was like the equivalent of racism, right? Like he was a downworlder, right? Like that actually was, she talked about that more than Alec being gay, was the issue that it was a downworlder, which to me is sort of the Shadowhunters version of race, right? And so to me it was a beautiful story in that it transcends, it's about prejudice in general, right? And how do we see past the bad parts of our upbringing that taught us hate, and how do we see through that to the actual person who's in front of us? And I thought it was really beautiful that Maryse not only embraced him, but that he ends up becoming one of her closest friends, and that she'd be lost without Magnus, that Maryse would be lost without Magnus is a really interesting part of her journey. Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing that I think it does, Cassandra Clare does this really well, and so, and in the Harry Potter series as well, where instead of talking about race, they talk about something that doesn't exist in our world. And I think part of what that does is that for people who are racist, I mean, everyone has an element of racism, but for people who are very discriminatory, they read those books, and because it's not talking about black and white or Asian and black, or they don't get triggered by their racism, so they start to love these characters, and the message sinks in kind of subversively, right? And I remember in a Harry Potter book once, there's a character who in multiple books since you'd known the character of Angelina in Harry Potter, they refer to her dreadlocks. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, I love that, because it's never mattered what race she was, because in that world, racism isn't an issue. And anyone who is racist against black people who's reading these books and loves them has suddenly found out that this character that they loved is a black person. And they have to deal with the fact that, are you gonna start hating that character now because she's black? So it's like there's a message in there that goes deeper, and that forces people who normally would put down a book about someone who is different from them, they keep reading. Right? And so for people, I think reading about the downworld and Shadowhunters, it's very much, it's symbolizing something much greater. Or not much greater, but something that exists in our time. Yeah. Oh my God, Al was horrible. I mean, and I think, I don't know if people know this probably at this point, but most of us found out on Twitter. I think Kat knew in advance, but a lot of us on the show found out. I started getting messages from friends being like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about your show. And I was like, what about my show? And they were like, oh, go and check Twitter. So I checked Twitter and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. So on one hand, it was really sad because we really did think there was going to be another season. And we left season 3 thinking that was the case. So sometimes when you know a show is ending, you say goodbye, you make your peace. You go back to the set one last time, but we didn't know at first that there was going to be the 2-hour special. So I didn't. So there was a moment of like, oh my God, I'm just never going to be on that set again. I'm just never going to see these people again. And then we found out about the movie, or not the movie, but the special. And that was great because we got to go in knowing we have this last 2 hours to make. And we were able to say our goodbyes. And we actually shot the wedding scene. That was the last thing we shot, so we were all together. And characters who hadn't been on the show for a while, they brought everyone back for this beautiful wedding scene. And then we had a big party on the set after. So it was like a really beautiful, it was sad it had to end, but it was a beautiful ending. And then what's so cool is because of these conventions, it didn't end. right? And one thing that most people don't get to experience, no matter how famous or rich an actor might be, unless you're in a certain kind of show with a certain kind of fandom, you don't get to do these conventions where you get to actually meet the people who made the show what it is. And so in actual fact, this journey has gone on for us for years. Like I think we got canceled at least 3, maybe 4 years ago now. But the journey of the show and our life with the show has gone on because of the fans and because of the conventions. And that's something I've never experienced with the show before. I'm getting to hear all of the fans' ideas and getting to talk about maybe what would have happened and talk about story and talk about it. It's been really amazing, and it gives the show a life after that a lot of artists don't get to experience when your show gets canceled. So I think we were very lucky. But our fans are exceptional. Like, there's a lot of great fandoms for sure. Like, I'm not saying that other fandoms aren't great. I don't know if this is the only show that I'm on that has this kind of following, but I really feel like, I mean, the internet is something we all know. The internet can be a very nasty place. And, you know, of course there's been conflicts in the fandom for sure, but in my experience, in 8 years or 7 years of doing this show, I don't think I've ever got one nasty comment on social media from a fan. Like, our fans tend to be incredibly empathetic, very kind, very thoughtful, and very committed people. And it really is, you know, when people invest in you like that as an artist, as an actor, when people invest in you that way, not only do the fans deserve to have us give that back to them, but you want to, because in your wildest dreams, you could never imagine these strangers caring about you and putting energy towards you the way that they do in this group of people. So it's been really amazing. And now after these years of doing the conventions and COVID and the online conventions were cool because as hard as it was to not be in person, for the first time we got to be one-on-one with people, right? And I got to actually get to know them. And so now when I see them in person, how's your dad? Or like, how's the new job? Or how, like, I know things about them. And so it creates a kind of community that's very real and different from any other, but definitely a very real community feeling, yeah. Good question. I think probably what I would like to see, so Maryse did a very sharp turn in her personality, right? And, you know, she worked for it. We saw her work, didn't happen overnight. Happened over the course of season 2, really. But I think the next chapter for Maryse, so she's happy, she's got her bookstore, she's got Luke, but the life that she left behind, the institute and politics and being the boss and all that, that's still very much in her world through her children. So I think the next step would be, how does she navigate being in these much closer relationships with her children and being part of the bigger Shadowhunter community without going back to the things that made her dark, the things that made her not as open to the world, and that sort of corporate culture, for lack of a better word, that she was in. So I'd be very interested to see, you know, like if the kids are consulting with her on things happening at the Institute, I would like to see how she navigates trying to support them and be a part of the Shadowhunter world without falling back into old habits. Because that's just something that is human, or I mean angelic in this case. People make mistakes, right? People fall back into old patterns. So I'd be curious to see how she deals with that.